Hello and welcome to another Legends of Terra podcast. My name is Conan once more, and today I'm joined by two guests. Vic doesn't play seasonals, he hosts a watch party, so I had to find two other members of the community who are going to participate or aim to participate. And today I'm joined by Astrofeesh
Hello.
and Yondy.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about yourselves, Astrofeesh. Who are you?
So,
What are you?
I'm Astrofeesh. I've been playing since about the start of open beta, actually. And I never really focused too much on climbing because I found it kind of boring. I usually pay more attention to deck building, coming up with unique decks. But I decided to give the gauntlet a shot this time, and I ended up going 5-0 in it. So it's really my first time in a somewhat competitive standing to this level. Before, all I had done is friendly tournaments.
Nice. Congrats on the last chance contest.
Yeah, good job.
Yondy, how about you?
Well, I'm Yondy, as you might know. I haven't been playing that long. I started playing around the age of RIWAN, and I just fell in love with the game, fell in love with the competitive scene because I like to try hard in mostly everything I do. So I just started playing, started meeting people in the Discord, in RIWAN and AVG, and just one thing led to the other, and I ended up playing for Gauntlet, playing for seasonals. I just like Astrofeesh. I don't quite like the climbing side of things, mainly because I never have the time to play like one game after the other like I should do if I wanted to climb. So I just jam my gauntlets on the weekends when I have time. And any time that I have left, I try to climb. But, I'm currently a plat player, which means that you shouldn't take what I say too seriously. But that's basically it.
Nice. And I'm very interested in your different approaches to the seasonals and to the game. Like last seasonals, we had very competitive players join, like Monte, for example, who are like deep into the stats and everything. And with this one, I decided to mix up a little bit and have you who might be not the people who climb to rank 1 masters every season, but you have been very successful in Gauntlet and you have put a lot of thought into these lineups. And I'm very excited to hear what you are planning to bring and how you're planning to compete in the seasonals. Before we go to that, I would like to showcase some of the tools we have over here for you to prepare the seasonals, in which I will be bringing up. First one is Mastering Terra, which is just an awesome page and has this matchup table, which doesn't have all the decks, of course, only like 20 around. And it's a very good, if you just bring meta decks, for example, you can check your win rate against other meta decks here. Also, there's some awesome articles and stuff like that. On the second, we just have lore.gg. If it's just a page where you can look up meta decks as well, or specific cards and specific players even. Then this page is very interesting. This is L lore stats, Legnar's Legends of Terra stats with R. And here you can look up specific matchups. So for example, on this page, matchups data, let's see if it's loading.
Yeah, sometimes it takes quite a bit to load.
For example, if you want to see how Nasus Thresh plays versus Jayce Lux, which would not be a very popular matchup otherwise, you can see it was played 43 times in Masters. If you expand to Diamond, which resets, but you can also filter by Diamond, for example. But there you can see like more obscure, more rare matchups that aren't really like just the 20 top meta decks, and it's very useful. Also, there's like a patch helper. And then we also have this list. This is one at Balco Mage, which compromises the top 100 players and all decks they played during the last week or so. It auto updates, and you can just look at deck lists basically. For example, Aribard, everybody's playing 3 Dancing Droplet, 3 Ari, 3 Bird. But then there's like some arguments about do we play 3 Shadow Assassins or 2, for example. It's really helpful to look at what the best players, like the best 100 players of each server, do and how they build specific decks and how you can also tech your decks versus certain matchups. And then just in case it's relevant, I also have like my deck list. This is one thing I didn't really showcase yet, where I basically try to write down how every single matchup in the game goes for like top 50 decks that were randomly chosen by me. And
yeah, that's impressive.
Some decks aren't actually in there. For example, I don't really recognize Taric Poppy as a real deck, but maybe you can convince me on the so you brought it.
Yeah, I will have quite a bit to say about that. Okay, can I plug just for a bit? I didn't see before when you showed me that you didn't have it, but Balco's site, the lore-meta.com. The Balco's website is the one that I use. It's also similar, but I really, really like it. I use it all the time, and it has more or less the same things that the other have too. But it also has the matchup table, which is in an Excel, and you can see like 27 decks around that. You can also see the archetype section, which you just plug in a deck and it shows you the specific matchup list for the deck and some of the highest win rate deck lists. So yeah, I'd like to plug that in because I also think that can be useful to whoever's listening.
Yeah. I think I know what list you mean, but funny side note, this one is made by Balance, as far as I know, this matchup table, and uses exactly the same 27 list as the Belco uses.
Oh, right.
A little bit cropped down. It's like the same data, basically. And I don't have the link right now. What is the link so I can showcase it?
Yeah, it's I'm typing it out right now in the Discord, but it's also lore-meta.com. LOR.
Meta.
It's how do you call it? That's the one.
This one.
Yep.
Okay. So if everybody like.
Yeah, that's the one from the weekly meta reports, but also in the top right you have the tools section, which is very useful to me. You have the matchup tables and you have the archetype section, and I think competitive players can really make good use of those tools.
Interesting. Yeah, nice shout out.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
This was the table, right? Yeah, like if you look here, this is the same table that's used also on like Twisted Fate, and it's as earlier, Anichin, Aribard. If you go over to our first page, it's also Twisted Fate, it's earlier, Anichin. I guess Aribard is further down.
Yeah, they're somewhat similar. At the end of the day, you're using more or less the exact same tool. But I also wanted to reference the archetype section, which shows you the lists and it shows you the matchup win rate. And I think that's also very, very useful.
Let's look at that as well. Archetypes. And so you just type in which deck you want, for example, right?
Yep.
Say, I saw your videos, show stats. And it just shows you for the specific deck, right?
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, you can filter it by time frame and rank. And it's all, it also shows you the win rates for the specific matchups, but also the deck lists. And then there's the cards page, which I think Balanced used to use to do their optimization tables. So that's my recommendation today.
Yeah. I had never heard of this page before, to be honest. But thank you for the shout out. It's very interesting and it seems cool to use. Like the range seems kind of very wide. Like for example, if you have like go from platinum, you have like 2,000 or 20,000 games, I think. And but again, I guess you can narrow it down to like masters as well. And just to look at it again. And then you're like at 11,000. Nice. It's very useful. I see some like oddballs in here, like Suit Up, for example. I guess Hush is okay. But yeah.
yeah, it can be
Seems similar to the one we have over the other side, with just the top 100 players on Masters. But yeah, it's super useful as well if you want to have like a broader view. Nice. But let's switch back over to your lineups, and we're going to start with Yondy. I named your decks 1, 2, 3, and just walk us through what maybe if you have like a general strategy to your lineup and then to the individual decks.
Sure. Yeah, so basically it was a very last minute lineup, I'm going to be honest. I just thought it on the street while I was walking to playing the Last Chance Gauntlet. But I wanted three very specific things from it. First of all, it had to be three decks that I was familiar with, because that's a lesson that I have had to learn time and time again, which is you have to play decks that you're familiar with and that you have fun with. Because if you go to, your matchup tables or your meta reports and you grab the decks that you think are best, chances are that you're gonna lose. And that's because you're not having fun with the decks, they're not familiar to you. And yeah, that's for me, is the top number one priority that you should look for in your lineup. And then the second thing that I was looking for was that it had to be favored or at least even against the most popular decks in the meta. I didn't have an exact idea of the most popular lineups of what they would be. But if you look at the matchup tables right there, you'll see that Aphelios B. Victor and Taric Toppy, and to a somewhat lesser extent, Jayce Lux, they have very even matchup spreads against the most popular decks. Especially, Taric Toppy just has an insane matchup table. You can see it. I don't know if it's there. Maybe if it's not there, maybe you could check the other one, the Valko one, or Legna. But
I will look it up.
But yeah, you see that Taric Toppy has a really, really good matchup spread against most of everything except Annie Twisted Fate. At the time when I looked for, the lineup, Action Renekton wasn't as popular. I didn't expect it to gain that much popularity. And that actually bit me in the ass when I was trying out the lineup against Walkabout, who is bringing a, full OTK lineup. And that's, I think, is insane. Shout out to him for the courage to bring that lineup. But anyway, if you see the matchup spread for the three decks, they are at least even. They don't have very, very bad matchups except for the hard control decks. In the case of Aphelios, Victor Bai, and Jayce Lux. And Poppy Taric doesn't suffer as much with control decks. It has a very specific counter, which is Ashe LeBlanc, which I really don't expect to be played that much. So yeah, that was the second requirement. It had to be favored or even, because I really don't like to be in matches where the result has already been decided before we play the game. I find that really frustrating. So I wanted to, have even chances against most of the field. I guess the dream, like the nightmare scenario for me, is when someone brings a triple control lineup, like maybe FTR and Heimer Jayce, and maybe even Trolls, if you can call that control, or I don't know, Targan Speak or Timelines. Because
Tribeam maybe?
Yeah, Tribeam works really poorly for me too. But yeah, other than that, I don't think it has a bad lineup. And it's a very specific one. Well, outside of, the OTK one, which I didn't think would exist, but that's another discussion, I guess, for another time. But yeah, other than that, it's just that specific lineup which counters it. So yeah, so far, it's three decks that are familiar to me and that are favored or even against most of the field. And then third, I wanted to bring Aphelios Lux. That was my third kind of requirement, but I couldn't bring it because, the nerfs to Bright Steel and to and to Broadwing really hurt that deck. And I was tinkering with it. I found it to be borderline unplayable, and I was really sad, but I still had to bring, two of my favorite champions, which are Lux and Aphelios. So I did bring them, albeit separately. And that was basically it for my lineup.
That's actually really good.
I noticed that out of your 3 decks, they all have the same combination of 3 regions. It's Targon, PNZ, and Demacia.
Excuse me?
Just like the only regions in your 3 decks are Targon, Demacia, and PNZ.
Oh, yeah.
There's like no other regions. It's just like your favorite regions.
Yeah, no, I'm going for a very specific thing there. And I don't want to deviate from that path.
It's actually interesting because many people just bring like triple Demacia, for example, or triple Targon, I guess. And you're just like bringing the same region.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about, like, I think if I had to change one deck in the lineup, it would be Aphelios v Victor, just because I think it's the one that has the most different game plan to the other 2. And I guess if I had to bring another one, it would probably be a Demacia deck like Ilawi, Demacia, or a Scouts, just because I think they are a bit more like, they would make a more cohesive game plan for the whole lineup. But I think it works, I think looking at the matchup spreads, and I've had a bit of experience playing other lineups, and I think it doesn't work too badly when you don't run into triple control.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And I think just looking at the matchup spread, you kind of convinced me that Poppy Taric is at least decent. Like, it doesn't have any really bad matchups.
Oh no, Poppy Taric is insane right now. It's probably at least one of the best decks, at least in ladder, But I do expect to find a lot more lineups based around it, because it's just a good deck right now, really good.
I was actually considering bringing Poppy Taric as a 3rd deck instead of the Sejuani one, but to be honest, I just don't really like Demacia that much.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
That's fair. So, for the more specific decks, was there anything you really checked for in these different decks? Is there started with like the Binding Light?
Yeah, so I thought, not specifically in the Winding Light, because I think if it has to play against Thralls, you're probably going to lose anyways. But I figured that I would be playing a lot of Thralls with Jayce Lux, because if you have a Thralls lineup, you're going to ban Poppy Taric, right? So you will have to win that matchup with Jayce Lux at some point. And so I picked a version of the deck that had 4 Aftershocks at the beginning. Right now, the latest version only has the 3. It has 2 from, main decking it, and 1 from the Tailstones. I opted to swap to, I used to run 2 Tailstones from Piltover, but now I'm running 1 from the Demacia, because I think that the trade-off is that you're running 4 Aftershocks in matchups when you don't need the Aftershock. It just becomes kind of a dead draw, especially against, OTK psychopaths like Fizz Riven and Renekton Action. So I ended up bringing 3, but when I was bringing, I still have to test it. I gotta be honest. I still have to test how it works, how it feels with 3, but 4 Aftershocks was a great idea against Thralls. Like, it's a pretty unfavored matchup for you, right? But once you start, once they start committing resources into their Thralls and you Aftershock them, they are at such a disadvantage that you gain at least 2 full turns to do your Jayce Lux shenanigans. So I think bringing Aftershock was a good idea. It also, incidentally, I don't expect to find a lot, but it also works really well against Sundisk, because you just crush their hopes and dreams from turn 2, and it does work well against Azirelia, even if it's not that great, because it works only on very specific situations. But yeah, I think if you're bringing Jayce Lux, running Aftershock is a good idea. It helps you make the unfavorite matchups a bit more bearable for you.
Absolutely. And I really like this version of you. I really like what you said about it, because the big problem with Jayce Lux historically has been that it can't really deal with the unfair things. Like the combo decks you said, with landmark decks, like with Tree, for example, you would just lose to Banning Tree all the time. And yeah, I like the changes you made to the deck for sure. We already here, let me check my current version of Jayce Lux to compare maybe.
Is it updated?
Yeah, I update my decks like each day. Like I currently have the version that like I play a ladder, and if I lose to a deck, I have to play that deck, and then I go to the list over here.
Wow, that's a great system.
This one, and then I just look up what do most people play. For example, I just go Control F, Jayce Lux. By the way, you will also find all of the lists to these resources in the deck list and in the description. And if you look for Jayce Lux, which is somewhere over here, you can just go through, and I usually just go for the most played ones. And you can see Aftershock is like 50% don't run it in High Masters, but like definitely play as a 2-off or as a 1-off. And Build on Tailstones is played much more as a 2-off, pretty even 30%.
Does that show win rates?
Not really, but it also only focuses on the top 100 masters,
right?
Which I prefer, since like many people like at low masters would just play meme decks or fun decks, or
no, it makes sense.
And I really want to focus on the more competitive ones.
Yeah, I do think that if you're playing it on ladder, it probably still is a good idea to bring the Aftershocks, to be honest, because you're gonna encounter a lot of thralls. And I forgot to mention too, it worked great against Twisted Fate / Annie / Conservatory decks, because you just pop the thing when they're like 4, the countdown is around 4, and you just delay their T-Bulk for, a lot. And that also works really well, because once they start getting their T-Bulk going, it's going to be a bit hard for this deck to come back from that, because T-Bulk is really, we're not really equipped to deal with units like T-Bulk.
I guess I can bring up T-Bulk while we talk about him. So if you're like newer to Legend of Terra, looking for cards you cut, but this is what you're talking about, the 1-mana landmark, which just counts down, and then you have T-Bulk, who just deals 1 extra damage, and all of your AoE just absolutely destroys you.
Exactly. So if you're running Jayce Lux and you have 3 to 4 Aftershocks in hand, you can deal with the conservatories, you can deal with both champions basically, and you can deal with most about any unit. But you do really want to hold it to kill the conservatory if you can. If you were not able to because the countdown is too low and you think they're gonna pop it anyway, you can just kill Annie, even leveled Annie dice to an Aftershock. So I think it's a good idea, because it targets a lot of what the meta brings right now, either on ladder or very probably on best of 3 too.
Yeah. Can you tell me what you cut from the standard list? Like you're probably more knowledgeable. I saw you cut 1 Vanguard Sergeant.
Yep.
And the Thermal Demon possibly, right?
Yeah, I did cut. Let me get my list, because I don't. Yeah.
I have it also open here. I can just like.
I did cut the Sergeant and 1 Persuader, because both were a bit of not exactly dead weights. I guess they work well, but since a lot of times you're fighting against decks that can deal very well with your units anyway, like Noxus has a lot of removal, Demacia just buffs their challenger units and just removes it from the field. I thought it was a good idea to cut it and put the aforementioned Aftershocks, and I think the rest is pretty standard. I think running 3 assembly lines, 3 shock blasts is standard when you're playing Jayce Lux. I do like the single copy of Albus Ferrus. I wanted to be greedy and bring 2, but I really think that's not a good idea. I'm hesitant on having that 1 copy, but I do think it's good because it really helps close a lot of games where you need the extra pressure. You don't draw it anyways, but when you do draw it, you draw it, and then you draw a Jayce. And yeah, the Tailstones too. The Tailstones are pretty flexible, and they just, help you have answers when you need them.
Oh, you cut the Protector, right?
I don't think the Protector is good in that deck, to be honest, especially after the nerfs. There's no early units that you really want to protect, because your early units are usually either Forge Chiefs? No. How are they called? Forge Workers, which are the 3/3 that you summon from the assembly line. And yeah, your early units, except maybe Petricite Broadwing, which was a really good combo, but it's not as good anymore. Except apart from that, you don't really want to be protecting your early units as much. You want to be protecting your Jayce and your Lux. Your Lux already comes with barrier, and if you make good use of that, then it's great for you. And you have the extra Damascene Tailstone to protect the Lux too. So that's I guess that's all that needs to be said about the Brightsteel Protector. I don't think it's that good in Jayce Lux at the moment.
And the top masters actually agree with you. We saw it just before, 99% don't play Brightsteel anymore. So I guess that wasn't quite up to date anymore after this buff, this specific deck. And I'm actually going to listen to you and just going to run the after.
Wow, that's such a privilege.
Like this. Still could be the 3/3 in for now, but maybe.
Oh, you'll see. You will see. I would love for you to get back to me and tell me about how the Aftershocks performed for you. I do run Brightsteel on Taric Poppy, though, because I think in that deck you really do want to be protecting your early units. And in that deck, also your champions are considered early units in some sense because they are just 4 mana. Even if Jayce is 4 mana, you're usually not playing it on curve. Whereas in Taric Poppy, if you have normally with just 2 mana bank to cast Pale Cascade, it's normally good enough to just put on a Poppy. In certain matchups, of course. Everything that I say is situational to the matchup that you're playing at the moment. But I do think Brightsteel is good in that scenario, mostly because you also have a lot of challengers. And the Brightsteel combo of protecting a challenger is still broken, right? So putting a barrier on a challenger in turn 3 or something and just killing whatever for free, that's still strong. That's still gonna be broken.
Maybe because I don't think this deck is super popular yet for many players. Walk us through the basic idea of the deck first.
All right, so basically what you want to do is just build up a board. What Demacia does best is just trading favorably into the enemy board and just building up that board, and then you buff it with Poppy, or you protect your units and just use Taric as a support and to also copy spells, because that's really strong. It can draw you a lot of cards with the support effect. Basically, it copies the spell you played, and then it plays it also on the supported unit. So if you cast Pale Cascade or Guiding Touch, you also end up drawing 2 cards, right? And so with that being said, you normally just dominate the early game, but one of the most broken things that you can do in this game right now is that you can actually double up a rally. If you cast it on Taric rallies, and then it copies the rally on the unit once you've cast your attack. So you end up attacking 2 times or even 3 times in a single turn, which is absolutely insane, right? And that's basically what the deck does. It stays on board, it doesn't let the board go, and just does unfair things all the time until your opponent is dead, and probably crying too.
Nice. I think you kind of convinced me of this deck. Anything specific you want to mention in the card selection, or is it just kind of?
I want to mention the triple Mountain Sojourners, which is the 5 mana support that changed the supports, and just it's broken, it's unfair. I love it. I love to play it. It's probably correct to have 2 copies instead of 3. I'm not sure about that. But I just like it so much. It's such a satisfying card that I think being there and just buffing your entire board with a chain of supports is insane, broken, very satisfying, and I will keep doing it until they nerf it. And that's basically it. It's one thing that I mentioned before, right? I think it's important that you have fun with the decks that you play. And this deck it's just really fun to play. If you play it and you're having fun, your brain is more engaged with the game and you're playing better. So I think it's a factor to take into consideration, right? The amount of fun that you're having with a deck.
Absolutely. I just looked it up. 98% of players play 3 Sojourners.
Wow.
So you're definitely right there.
Right.
Of the good players.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like a good player now.
Yeah. And 1 of Bastion, 2 single combat, 2 sharp side, 2 concerted. Seems like...
Yeah, no, that list is the standard ladder list.
I don't have sharp side.
List because it's also the most popular and the one that has the higher win rate by an ample amount. So I think that list is pretty much solved. So I felt like I didn't have to touch it at all. I see you searching for sharp side. Indeed, it's a Demacia deck that doesn't play sharp side. It's a process, I'm still dealing with the fact that I don't play sharp side, but I think it's very much correct to not play sharp side. You only suffer against the Ari matchup specifically, and you have so many ways to keep your board alive that you don't end up missing the sharp side, except when you're playing against maybe Nami TF, Shadow Wilds, and Dari, which I think are still favorable because you have such an insane amount of pressure with your challengers that I don't think the sharp side in a defensive turn would end up mattering that much. I think the challengers just do all that work for you and deal with Nami and the elusives before you need to ever cast a sharp side. I might be wrong though. I do want to test how the sharp side performs, but I'm not sure I'm going to have the time, so I'll just leave it as it is for now.
And I don't know if it was visible, but it was 40% play to sharp side and 48% don't play sharp side at all. And so it's a little bit of an argument here.
Yeah.
Interesting. I can't consider a deck without sharp side, but maybe this is the deck.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
I'm really surprised by this deck. I think you actually single-handedly convinced me that this is a real deck.
Oh no, it's very real, my friend. You should try it on ladder and see how it does for you, because I can assure you that it will do some absolutely nasty stuff for you.
Nice. And the third deck is actually one I played a lot, but I played the Zoe version, and it's the Winning Light, I believe, right? Yes.
Yeah.
The Winning Light.
Yeah. And
this one's pretty well known. What ratios did you change over the years?
I didn't change anything, and as I mentioned, this is the deck that I'm the most hesitant about, because I'm not really sure it's correct to have a deck that is not trying to do the same things as the other decks in your lineup. And this deck, this deck really looks for is to mount some early aggression to, get early cheap damage on the board and finish up with either the Winding Light or your burn in Get Excited and Mystic Shot. And I'm not exactly 100% convinced. I just love Aphelios, I love Victor, and I love to have fun with my decks. So that's why I chose it, because, well, basically I looked at the matchup spreads and they told me it wasn't too crazy to bring them, right? Because they have very similar matchup spreads. But yeah, I'm not entirely convinced that I shouldn't swap it for us, maybe Scouts or Ilawi Demacia. But I do like the deck, and at the end of the day, that's probably a thing that really does matter, right?
Yeah. I find some of these ratios really confusing. Like one Sunhawk,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like one Hush.
So I'm gonna give you a little bit of reasoning. The only ratio that I'm actually not sure would be the 3 copies of the Winding Light, actually, because I find that they are cluttering my hand too much in most matchups. You only ever need the one, and if you cast that one and you are not in a position where you win in the next few turns, then you're probably not going to win anyway. You probably don't need to cast the second one because you already lost. But yeah, that might be just me, doing bad player things. The Solari Sunhawk is there to stall, basically, or to remove a blocker from the equation. If you start a turn with your Solari Sunhawk, the opponent knows that you're about to slam their board. They're probably either looking to remove something or to put on more blockers. But in any case, your deck is one deck that really wants your opponent to do things and to spend mana doing things, because you want them to not be removing, basically. You don't want them to have a lot of mana, right? Because a lot of mana means that they can cast Buried in Ice. A lot of mana means that they can cast the Ruination or your board removals. You don't want them to have a lot of mana, or maybe even the Vengeances, right? You want them to keep spending resources on dealing with your stuff, and so I guess Solari Sunhawk is there to do exactly that, right? Because when you put it on, you exert a bit of pressure on the opponent, or on the other side, if you're on the back foot, right, and you're playing against an aggro deck, then it buys you a couple more turns to stabilize. So that's what the single copy is there for. I'm not entirely sure that it's correct myself, but so far it's done okay for me,
Interesting, because I think this, like, my biggest criticism is just one Thumb Dredger, because it just doesn't feel like the aggressive deck anymore. It just feels more mid-rangey with like Victor and some random interaction cards. I know some pro players are very high on Hush, but
yeah. So
it's the first time I see this Victor list.
Oh, I lost you there for a moment. Could you repeat what you said?
No problem. I'm like, the biggest problem I have is the 2 Thumb Dredgers.
Right.
I have one Thumb Dredger, because like I can bring up my Winding Light list.
Sure.
I played Winding Light on the American server and went like just from RIWAN up, and had like a 95% win rate, or like 85%, I guess, after going to Platinum. And yeah, this is like the more standard version with like 2 Zoe. You also cut the 3 Flame Chompers, was also gone, and Baker's Gate. You also like the usual 2 Pharaoh's Fiancé, 2 Mountain Goat, and then 1 Trifecta, which I kind of don't like.
Right.
I don't want to bring that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
3 Thumb Dredgers.
And why do you have the 2 Mountain Goats instead of the 3?
Because you run too many 2-drops otherwise. You always want to play Boomer Boon, you always want to play Flame Chompers,
right,
and don't need that many 2-drops.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I guess I can see how having the Flame Chompers and the 3 Mountain Goats would clutter your hand with 2-drops too much. Yeah, that's really interesting. How did Zoe perform for you on this deck?
She's kind of fine. She's like whatever, just like 1/1 that looks like another elusive. I kind of can see why I would play Victor over her, but at the same time I really like. I wouldn't go away from the core Thumb Dredger, Flame Chomper, Boom Baboon ever, because like you said, it just feels like a different deck. Like you just have these power turns where you go, I guess, Dustbringer into Boom Baboon into Chomp into this kind of Thumb Dredger, and then you hit your opponent for, I don't know how much, 9 damage, and then just have to like push 5 more damage, and you just burn them out. And that's like really what I want this deck to do.
Right.
Just be very aggressive and similar to Scouts with reorders and arms. And I feel if I just add random cards like Sunhawk or Clutter into my deck, it just doesn't do that anymore. Like you said yourself, consider going down to 2 Winding Light. And is it really a Winding Light deck? Then if it doesn't really want to have its card.
Yeah, I guess what you say is true, and there's a lot of merit to that point, that if you don't draw your Winding Lights, then you're you're not doing your thing.
And I guess this deck is just more focused on interaction and on doing different stuff.
Yeah, that this deck I found it to be a little bit more, even throughout the board, right? Because I guess I can see how it could lose to decks like Ash LeBlanc, maybe way worse than by Zoe Aphelios those. But I think the fact that you have an extra threat in Victor, makes you better into decks that can deal with your early aggression, right? Because you have to deal with the early aggression, and you also have to deal with Victor, which each turn gets stronger and gets better. And also the fact that if you have both Victor and Aphelios on board, which doesn't happen very often, right? But when it happens, you're playing your guns for free, and a lot of cards that you get for free too. So I really just like that interaction, right? And I really liked Aphelios Victor back when it was a thing. So this deck, it's basically, it makes more sense to me to have in the Masha lineup, right? Because it's a bit more mid-rangey, as you said. You were entirely right about that. And so you have two other decks in your lineup that are also a bit stronger in the mid game. So that's why I ended up bringing this version, right? Because you have you have three decks that are a bit more similar than if I had brought the Zoe Aphelios Vi version.
Absolutely. I can see a lot of thoughts going into this as well. I think we can still refine this list a little bit with like the ratios and stuff. But the other two really convinced me, and just so I changed my version of the Lux deck because of your input.
Yeah, so I'm waiting on feedback on that one from you. And also, yes. I would like to test our lineups at some point.
Yes, but first we have Astrofeesh. I hope you're still here. Let's take a look at your lineups as well and your strategy before we move on to what I am considering. Right. So, what is your overlying strategy?
So, I don't actually have as much of a developed strategy as Yondy does. I usually just choose decks that I enjoy playing, that sort of work well together. So if you notice, all three of my decks are generally in the mid-range category. I have Nasus Thresh, which isn't really fast enough to be aggro, but it can be pretty fast. Then you have a big Nasus to finish things off. Then you have Reputation, which is basically a tempo deck that can just turn into a slow control deck by playing Grey Apothecary.
Oh, you played it? Wow, that's so cool.
Which is one of my favorite decks of all time. And then my third deck is Gnar Sejuani, which is sort of a very mid-range deck based around pinging the opponent's Nexus. And then you can just play Sejuani or what's it called? Mini T, and just lock the opponent down completely.
That's great.
So they all have a very mid-range game plan. So their matchups tend to be pretty similar as a result. It's generally they all aren't that good against aggro, but do well against other mid-range decks and control. But since I generally don't play meta decks, I don't really pay attention to specific matchup spreads at all. Because if you notice, I think the only deck that's anywhere close to meta out of those three is Nasus Thresh, and even that I don't think shows up on the matchup tables at all, because
it doesn't show up on the first one, but it shows up on
I think there's one.
This one. Yeah, this one. It shows up now. This Thresh as there's a decent amount of games played.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent matchup spread, but it's not really tier 1 or anything.
Reputation doesn't show up. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm like the only person to remember that Reputation exists. And then Gnar Sejuani, it's sort of a deck, but if you see, it only has like the games are in the double digits for everything except like an ETF. So it's really not very accurate information. And
I find this very interesting that you bring 3 non-meta decks, because you are already like a bigger expert on the deck than your opponent is. I think that's like a big value. Like if you just bring 3 meta decks, your opponent has probably faced them on a ladder 50 times and already knows like
your
the in and outs of each matchup.
Yeah, because if you bring like meta decks, your opponent has probably played against them a ton of times, so they know what to expect. But if you're showing up with like Sivir LeBlanc, no one knows what's gonna happen. They might like remember back from, was it Rise of the Ascended when it came out? Like Stream Expansion, the original Reputation deck, but that would be like more than a year ago last time I was seeing any amount of play. And I've never had anyone expect the just dropping Great Apothecary and swapping into a like control value deck, because you just get an infinite value engine out of nowhere, and suddenly all your cards become like they essentially give you a strong card in your hand whenever they die, and you can just grind out like any other deck that's not aggro just through sheer value.
Yeah, it's so based, like it's just so cool. Like this is the matchup I never want to face, just 3 random decks like and I just have no idea. Like I can have like a whole spreadsheet set up for every single matchup, but then you just show up and it's like all invalidated on preparation and just have to play normal games.
I can imagine you frantically looking.
Just looking.
He's just like so focused on what doing to the meta decks, you never expect the unplayed ones. But yeah, I did use some statistics when building them, specifically for Nasus, Thresh, and Gnar. Is that I looked at the win rates of the decks on LOR.GG. And I used like the individual win rates of the cards to choose how to build the decks. So
wow.
If you search up like Nasus Thresh, for example.
I just do like this.
Be the top one for that.
Always has like search for cards.
But it might be in the archetype section in that same tab index.
Yeah.
Okay. And then champions, Thresh, Nasus.
There you go. So if you click on it, you can see like you can see the individual win rate of each card in the deck. Like, for example, the sort of baseline win rate is 49.6, but if you notice, if you scroll down, cards like Treasure Seeker, for example, has a 48% win rate. So even though it sees a decent amount of play, it ends up being not the best card to include in the deck. But meanwhile, if you look at stuff like Hapless Aristocrat, it's all the way up to a 54% win rate. So if you notice in my list, I'm running Hapless Aristocrat in my run drop slot. That's a 2-up. And like almost all of the deck decisions or deck building decisions I made in that are based on the statistics. I have like a Backeye Sand Spinner as a 1-of in the 4-drop slot, and like a Crumble as a 1-of.
Wow.
And I think I'm running the box as well. Because
so
all of
cool.
those cards had like very high win rates in the decks that were playing them. And I found that while I was playing, they've like been able to win me games just on their own when I draw into them. Like the box is able to just completely clear a turn, and because no one expects the card to be in your deck if you don't have a Thresh out, right? So no one plays around it. and cards like the box are very good if your opponent doesn't play around them.
Yeah.
You can just,
I guess seasonal is this open deck list, so you kind of know that it's in there. But even if you know about it, then you have to think about, do I play around the box? Do I play the second unit? Do they have the one-off?
Yeah, it's very hard to play around a single copy of the box. But I can see it's really brilliant.
Yeah, one-ups are like especially good in open deck lists because your opponent always has to play around it. Like I used to, a long time ago, I was playing an opening deck this tournament, and I ran a one-up judgment specifically so the opponent could never open attack without worrying about judgment.
Actually, I did that as well. Like last, when I played Pantheon in an ADG tournament. Where is it? No, it's. I also brought the one-off judgment, and I decided to disrespect it and just lost to it. That's a great strategy.
That's great.
I didn't actually look at the any deck lists for Nasus Thresh at all when I built this version of it. I only looked at the individual card win rates, just it's the stream a bit broken. Seems to be repeating.
What, the stream?
Repeating.
No, I think it works good.
Yeah,
might just be on my side.
Yeah, to go out of the stream and rejoin it, maybe that might fix it. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
And I will make use of this time to let you know, Astrofeesh, I really admire and appreciate your courage. I wish I had that amount of courage. I also love to play spicy lists, but I wasn't brave enough to bring the triple spice to open rounds. So yeah, I admire you.
Yeah, me too. I was like, in the Yondy's lineup, I was like, Toppy, Taric, that's spicy, and Jayce Lux.
But it's not. It's not really. It's probably one of the most popular decks on ladder right now. And yeah, I mean, it's not Sivir, LeBlanc, Apothecary, right? That's
but it literally doesn't show up on this list yet. Like for example, on the win rate list, I faced it 2 times over my last 80-90 games.
Wow.
Yeah, my lineup for Gauntlet was a bit different for this. Actually, I had Nasus Thresh still, but I had Sejuani Gangplank as well, and Seraph Cillian, which are both decks that you never see on ladder at all.
Right.
And I went 5-0 with it, so it's a pretty good strategy apparently.
Yeah.
If people don't really know what to play around, it makes it a lot easier to play, you know?
That's a great strategy.
Yeah, so that's just my general strategy for choosing my lineups.
Nice. And let's maybe look a little bit more at the individual decks. I'm I used to play Expeditions a lot when it was around, so I know a lot more about these different archetypes. And I guess Nasus Thresh is kind of the same as it used to be. One card I immediately noticed missing is
I don't even know if there was that many new cards.
What do you think about that part?
I'm really interested in that because Nasus Thresh was before my time. I'm a relatively young Runeterra player, so I really would like to know how does it work, why does it work, what it is.
I guess, let's walk us through the deck first. That.
Essentially, Nasus Thresh is it's sort of the evolved version of an archetype that started way back in the open beta called, it's just Shadow Isles aggro, really. And the point to it is you play units like your 2-drops, which are I can't remember the name off my head. In the stream.
Questkeeper, Fading Icon.
Yeah, the Cursekeeper, Fader Icon. They give you units that you can kill off easily. And then you have cards like Butcher and on the stream just crashed. I think I have like slight technical difficulties here.
Yeah, it's like just basically sacrifice these units to get slays, and then you build up a Nasus.
Right.
And essentially, Nasus works perfectly in the game plan of killing your own units and killing your opponent's units, because it's all working towards making Nasus really big, right? So if you play like you have the game plan essentially starting off as an aggro deck where you play like Curse Keeper on 2 and the Blade Caretaker on 3 for 10 damage swing on turn 3 with the Feminine Challengers. That just completely overwhelms the opponent. And you have stuff like Merciless Hunter and Back Eye Sandsburner as well to like make sure they can't keep anything on board. And then you have cards like Spirit Leech and I didn't actually put in what's it called?
Glimpse Beyond.
I'm not even running Glimpse. Wow.
Yeah, that's what surprised me as well. Like, you missed some of the cards I would put in.
I played an entire gauntlet with this deck. I didn't even realize I didn't have I don't even know if it's worth changing now. Maybe it just works.
Nah, Glimpse sounds like a natural inclusion, I guess.
It's probably worth cutting things for it, but now I have to spend time figuring out what to cut. But yeah, Spirit Leech is a great draw too. And yeah, essentially you either tutor Nasus with Thresh or Rite of Calling, or you just draw them too naturally, and you get like a massive 10-10 body, probably bigger, that gains Spell Shield, and you can just throw Atrocity on it to finish off the opponent, which is a pretty consistent game plan most of the time. Yeah. And it's generally pretty hard to interact with too, because when Nasus levels up, he gets Spell Shield. So the only chance your opponent has to stop him is in between the time when you play him and when he strikes. So they really need something like Vengeance or Disintegrate, or he's gonna just end the game on his own. And even if you don't get Nasus down, you can sometimes just win through pressure with cards like Blade Caretaker and Merciless Hunter, just beating down your opponent that way. So it ends up being a very versatile mix between like mid-range and aggro. And yeah, that's just the way the deck works, really.
And maybe as a side note, this deck was very popular in the most rock, paper, scissors format of the Runeterra. We had like Azir Irelia in the meta, and this deck was very good against the Irelia because you just slayed all of the Sand Soldiers, and then you would grow your Nasus infinitely. So this one basically hard countered the Irelia, and then later on, Trundle Lysandra, switch over. Lysandra Control came around. They just cheated out the Watcher for basically free, and then obliterated your opponent's deck. It used to just obliterate the complete deck, not just the non-champions. So this one would just basically bully this Swarm deck, and we had the Rock, Paper, Scissors, where Lysandra was like 20% into Aziralia. Aziralia was 20% into Thresh Nasus, and Thresh Nasus was, it's like a circle going around.
There's also like a nice side effect of Aziralia coming back into the meta, is that this deck has a very good matchup into it. It's almost like a guaranteed win a lot of the time. And it's a deck that's very popular because Aziralia can beat most other decks, but this is one of the decks that has the most trouble against. It's basically its natural counter.
And one of the biggest combos I always missed was you can have two Nasus on the field. Like you play Thresh on turn 5, you level them up somehow by trades. Just play Thresh, attack. And then on turn 6, or like block or something. And then on turn 6 you play Nasus. And then Thresh pulls out another Nasus. And then you have two Nasus. It's really hard to deal with.
That sounds busted.
You don't usually need to do that to win, though.
You don't have to, but against some decks it's good. Like against control decks, it was really useful. It ended up like against Freljord, I used to run Flash Freeze, just freeze your Nasus, so you can atrocity it. If you had 2 Nasus out, then you couldn't do it. So Alan's Q back then started running Harsh Winds just to answer both Nasus at the same time. I found pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's Thresh Nasus. It's pretty straightforward. The next deck is Reputation, which used to be an archetype that was pretty popular back when Shurima first came out. And it was essentially just a aggro deck with big units. You ran stuff like Ruin Runner as your finisher, and it really just all it did was just like exploit how strong the Sivir package was. But once people figured out that you could just run Sivir and Demacia instead with Akshan, it just completely fell off because the Demacia version was pretty close to strictly better in like every matchup. And there just wasn't enough support in Noxus that was actually good, because all the reputation payoffs were pretty bad. But there have been a bunch of buffs to Noxus recently in the reputation. Like LeBlanc got buffed to give you a mirror image when she levels up now. The finisher for it, which is Incisive Tactician, got buffed to 5 mana, or 5 attack, sorry. So you can target it with mirror image, which is a very strong combo. And then it also got the card of Grey Apothecary, which just completely negates the original weakness of the deck, which is that it could get like out-grinded by control and slower decks. So essentially, what the deck does is most of the time you play out a curve of units like Treasure Seeker, Snapper into a House Spider, or Glory Seeker into LeBlanc or Merciless Hunter, and so on. And that places a ton of pressure on your opponent to answer it. And sometimes that's enough to win on its own. If it's not, you have a bunch of other game plans. You can play Grey Apothecary if your opponent's managed to stabilize. And because it generates a 5 power unit every time one of your units dies, since all of your units have 5 power, you turn from an aggro deck into a like slow control value deck, and you just, by playing one card, you're able to completely change around your game plan, which is very strong. And it just turns a lot of your bad matchups into good ones. Like suddenly slow decks that could normally just outlast you before now have to like both outlast you and outvalue in the late game with Apothecary, which is close to impossible. You can only really do it if you have like landmark destruction for it. And you also have Kato the Arm on the Sivir, which is a very strong combo because it gives you Overwhelm, and then all of your units have Overwhelm, which is, considering they all have 5 and more attack, is enough to usually win in just like one attack. And then the other combo is Incisive Tactician with a level LeBlanc. If you play a mirrored image on it, it gives it another copy of it, and every time you do that, it rallies. So what ends up happening is you play Incisive Tactician, you rally and attack, then you play mirror image on Incisive Tactician, and then you attack again. And then because that's generally enough power to get more mirror images off LeBlanc, you can theoretically just keep doing that until your opponent's dead. So it's, well, yeah, of course, unless you run out of mana, but generally the opponent dies before you run out of mana, so. But it ends up being essentially the same combo as Taric Poppy, where you get to attack like 3 or 4 times in the same turn. And it just is very unfair when you get to pull it off. But it's not quite as easy to achieve as Taric Poppy, since you have to both level up LeBlanc and have a And Incisive Tactician is 6 cost, Reputation instead of like the 4 cost of gold niches. And you can just counter it by killing Tactician too. But yeah, it's essentially just a very versatile mid-range deck that doesn't really have any decks that directly counter it, because it has a game plan for like every single scenario.
It's such a cool description. I really like it, and it's so cool that somebody actually tries to make Rare Passive Carry work in like a competitive environment. Another thing I want to notice is what do you plan with these Noxian Tailstones?
Noxian Tailstones is like 90% of the time you just use it for Whirling Death, because the deck just used to run Whirling Death straight up. But since with Tailstones you also have the ability of getting Sharpened Resolve, which is pretty valuable a lot of the time. Because it's just a sort of backup buff spell that can protect your units. I've never chosen the other option off it though, the Weapons of Lost, because it's just not a good card. But I'm sure there are situations where it's playable. And then you also have like Bloody Business as a just very good removal spell, since all your units have 5+ power. It just like 4 mana remove a unit.
Great. And I love the Kato. I have to say that Kato is like one of my favorite cards, and you never saw really play, and you bring him in, and if you can also Kato like mirror image on Kato, and then you have like overwhelm Kato.
Yeah,
it's just so cool.
In the old version of Reputation, you couldn't justify running him because you just had to run 3 copies of Ruin Runner. But now that Ruin Runner is only 3 health, it's a lot less consistent as a win condition. And Kato actually ends up being a bit better in this deck.
So cool.
Because the 3 health does matter a massive amount. A lot of the time when you played it before, you would like have it be able to trade into 3 attack units and still stay on the board.
Crazy. Okay, and the third deck?
The third deck is Sejuani and Gnar, which is essentially pretty similar to I believe there's another Gnar deck running around in Freljord Vandal, but it's essentially based around pinging the Nexus each round to level up Sejuani, and then using that to lock down the board. So it's actually very similar to an old deck called it was Sejuani Teemo, which tried to do the same thing. It's like a pretty popular meme deck, but it never really saw competitive play. But now that you can run Sejuani in Vandal City instead, it gives it a lot more consistency. And you also have a lot of the buffed transform units like Chief Knack Attack and the Lizard on 2, which just give you very strong like mid-range. Because the 2 mana 3/4 with Impact is a pretty good play, and you generally have the ability to ping the Nexus in almost every round. Because essentially the vast majority of your cards in this deck either damage the Nexus or protect your units. You have like Elixir of Iron, 3 Sisters, and Troll Chant. And like every single other card in that deck either has Impact or the ability to ping the Nexus.
So cool.
Technically Ursine Spirit Walker doesn't have Impact, but it has Overwhelm, which is a very similar effect. It comes down and like finishes the game. And you're just playing stuff on curve and pinging the Nexus as much as you can to get value out of your transform units in Sejuani. And you have, in the late game, you have the Sejuani lock, but you also have Mini-T to essentially prevent your opponent from playing any big units, since it just, whatever they play gets like mini-morphed at the start of the turn. So all the units have to be smaller than the mini T, or they just get immediately transformed and they can't be interacted with at all. Then you have Ursine Spirit Walker as yet another win condition, because it turns all of your big transformed units into threats with Overwhelm. And essentially you can just swing and like overwhelm the board like that. And then you also have just like very strong 4-drops in Gnar and Teeny Dactyl. Gnar can just Gnar can like remove a unit just on his own through its vulnerable effect on when he levels up, and he fits perfectly into the game plan of being your units and combos very well with Chief Knack Attack, since you're transforming him multiple times. You can stack up a lot of impact on him as a result. And then Teeny Dactyl just gives you a guaranteed Nexus ping every single round if you manage to level it up, which essentially means if you get out with Sejuani, the opponent is completely locked out of the board. Since round start, you frostbite every single one of the units.
That's so cool.
It's a very strong combo. And it also
so
just
how consistent
means you
was
don't
this
have
deck
to
for you?
use
Did
your
you
cards
practice
to
it
set
or
up
try it?
things.
How consistent is this deck for you? Did you try it out on like ladder or something, or in Gauntlet afterwards?
No, I haven't given it much of a shot yet. Because I normally don't actually give my decks that much testing before I play them. I just make sure I know how they play. Like Nasus Thresh, I hadn't actually played before I took it into Gauntlet outside of like one game. And I managed to win every single game of Gauntlet I played with it. So
That's so cool.
Funnily enough, a lot of the time I find that I do better with decks the less I've played with them.
That's actually the same for me, because like if you're new to a deck, you really focus more on it, and you're like, oh my god, this line is new, this is, so you're more excited. And you played the same matchup like 5 times or 10 times, and just like autopiloting and making mistakes because of that.
Yeah, I can see.
Playing random decks.
I can see how you start struggling with autopiloting once you're very familiar with a deck. It happens to me too.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's essentially my lineup. It's 3 mid-range decks that have pretty good late game, and they tend to be pretty good against other mid-range decks and control decks, but they're like not good against aggro at all. Best deck against aggro is probably Nasus Thresh and Sivir, because they can both sort of fill the board enough to be able to jump block until later on. But I don't think any of my decks have any healing at all, so they like just lose to burn usually. Yeah, that's about it.
Nice.
I wanted to mention before we move on from Astrofeesh's lineup that they actually have a deck guide for the Apothecary Reputation Sivir LeBlanc deck that they wrote in RIWAN, which I will link in Discord if you want to link it in the description or something. It's incredibly detailed, so anyone listening to this that was even mildly curious about how the deck works, I know I was, but I've already read the guide, so I already knew all the details. But yeah, you have that guide, which is great, and I recommend you give that a read.
Absolutely. Also check out the Substack. You have like a RIWAN, you have like a lot of different articles for a lot of fun decks. I know, Yondy, you also participate in these, I think it's the Airfield or Flyfield, where you just test out decks over and over again.
Yeah, and we're actually testing this one right now. It's in the works. It's in early stages of a draft. You're probably gonna have some of RIWAN's players' opinions on this deck.
Amazing.
It's like probably the most played Reputation spin since it first came out.
might be.
Actually true.
Well, you almost single-handedly popularized Caitlyn Mill, which I don't know if the people listening know this, but Astrofeesh actually invented Caitlyn Mill, Shadow Wilds, which is a crazy concept, which I will also link.
I almost considered bringing it to my lineup, but I think that's a bit too much. Like this.
Yeah, I can see how it could be considered too much.
Yeah, but it's a very fun deck where you essentially use Hexcore Foundry to mill out your opponent, and there's a guide on it that I wrote. It's pretty in detail.
Nice. I love these like not really popular concepts, and like these few decks actually seem like they could work in that, like could perform decently, especially against opponents when are not prepared for them, don't even know what to play against. And yeah, I think this is a great lineup.
All three of these decks I'd consider pretty viable. Probably not tier 1, but I think they're all somewhere around tier 2 or tier 3.
I agree with that. And yeah, like the podcast is already very long. I wanted to mainly showcase what our guests are playing. So I'm going to be a little bit short on my end. Just want to show my I have like 3 ideas for my lineup. The most common one would just be Winding Light and Scouts, because also like my most played decks. I also like have this deck I had like played in the last 2 seasons that didn't change. It's like the one Cataclysm and the Shield of the Round. I guess you now play Inspiring Light in the deck.
Yeah.
So maybe I should put this in. But this is like my general idea, either like play 2 Swarm decks, and I was like searching for a third deck that's similar, so that the Orders and Arms, for example, or even like now I'm considering this deck. Yondy, you convinced me.
It's a good one.
A good one, what? Yeah. And the second lineup I considered was the double attack one that Yondy, you faced already. With like
the OTK one, you mean?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's really strong. I encountered it in tournament, and it just smashed pretty much everyone.
Basically, you just play Papercraft Dragon in 3 different decks and just go double attack. And basically, Riven Fizz is the one deck, and you just play Akshan Renekton as a second deck. They just go big overwhelm, and thing is, this is just like a very high rolly deck. Like if you draw your Papercraft and your Fizz each game, you can't lose. But if you low roll, you can lose to a worse player. But it would allow me to bring my personal favorite deck ever, which is Jayce Shen.
Wow.
And I also wanted to quickly talk about that as well, because I actually won an AVG tournament with this deck. It sounds pretty stupid, but the basic premise is you have Jayce, who has like Challenger, and then you have Shen, who gives Barrier, was buffed as well. And they just work very well together as a mid-range core. And then you have random early game units that refuel your spell mana, Forge Chief and Eye of the Dragon, just give you units while also giving you these spells for heavy spell plays later. And Ferris Financier just gives you a big card, Shape that draws you more spells. And the main combo of this deck is actually with Sacred Protector. Because Sacred Protector gives you allies with Barrier double attack. So this is why it would fit in with the Papercraft Dragon deck. And then you have a Thumbwork Snap. I'm not sure if this is the best one. You can also play like Ambush and stuff to give you a unit elusive. And then the other combo is you can actually double up the Chance Then United with Jayce. And you might be like, what does this do? Just swap your units deck. But if you have a level 2 Jayce out, whenever you give an ally barrier, it gets +3/+0. So with a Jayce out, you get 2 units +6/+0. And if you happen to have a Protect out as well, you also get them double attack. And I've killed people surprisingly a lot of times with just an Eye of the Dragon, because we were like, I have to block my Jayce, I have to block big units. And just came in with an Eye of the Dragon, who got buffed to a 7/3 double attack, just casual 14 damage. And it's just a very fun combo. And you have like Tailstones.
Having really janky combos like that is that no one ever plays around them.
Yes, and like if I give you this deck and be like, what does this do? You will look at it like for half of your gauntlet time or seasonless time and be like, I still understand this deck. And then you're like, okay, it's probably like a mid-range deck and some kind of value deck, and then you just get OTK'd by Session Protector. It's like,
yeah, then it's like a
thing ever.
really interesting like strategy, right? Making a deck that's impossible to tell what it does in the time you have in Gauntlet.
Just to confuse the opponent into submission. That's a good strategy. Yeah. It's perfectly valid.
And you kind of motivated me right now to bring like build deck mob on Jayce Champion with your lineup Astrofeesh, just seeing how you bring 3 original decks. It's really, really cool and like makes me reconsider if I want to bring like my deck. Because it went 5-0 against good players. Like I guess I lost one match later on of this tournament in AVG. I lost to Winding Light, but it's a good deck against good players. It doesn't really work on ladder because people are just like YOLO, Bard, attack you with 5,000 creatures. I don't care what you do. If you have opponents who start to think about it, they will just get so confused by their deck and be like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore, and just like OTK them randomly. Also if like denies to stop your play, opponent's plays it just like peak unintactiveness. And you also have burn. It's like funny as well. Like if you have them stop your buy, you can just like double shock blast them to face. You have that mystic shot, just kill any and stuff. It's a really cool deck.
That's such a great concept, and I'm actually thinking that maybe we should test that over at RIWAN.
Absolutely. I didn't really have much time to refine it yet, but it's like I'm working on this deck since like 2 seasons.
Wow.
It started as a deck roll deck. I just rolled in a Jayce, and then I went like 6-0 in normals, and I was like, what is going on? And I went like 3-3 in Master's Ladder, and I was like, maybe this is like actually a concept. And then I lost it, and then they actually buffed Chen, and then I was like, oh my god, I have to revisit Chen Jayce because of the barrier now.
That's such a cool concept, Conan.
Nice. Yeah, thanks. I really like it. And I consider just bringing like 2 different combo decks, like I said earlier, and Thralls. I had like good results on Thralls, or like just more interactiveness of like Bard Ari. And the third lineup I considered, or still considering, is just bring 3 mid-range Slayers. So what I mean with mid-range Slayers is, for example, timelines. You have like a story early game, and you just have cards that say I win if the game goes to later turns. If you just run a mid-range deck that slams you on the board, like now the Thresh, for example, like your Sejuani deck, I just play Buried in Ice, I just play Tilted Stairs, obliterate everything, and then I'm just like sitting here with like a Trundle, Ravna, random units, and basically bring triple Buried in Ice or similar effects to just like completely beat up on mid-range decks, like this lineup, for example.
What would be
your
anti
mid-range deck? Sorry, go ahead.
No. You go ahead. I can.
Oh, all right. I was just saying that anti mid-range decks are like a really fun type of deck to play. I found it's just like mid-range decks that are specifically tech to beat other mid-range decks end up having like really cool ways of playing, because essentially playing more for the late game and like outvaluing people than you are for the more tempo version of mid-range. And I just found that makes it a lot more fun to play.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yondy, what was your question?
I was going to ask, what would your other 2 decks be in that lineup, in that anti-mid-range lineup?
There are plenty of options actually to counter mid-range. I personally think that Pantheon Yumi is not dead at all, but you can still definitely play it if you plan to go against mid-range decks. If you want to beat Winding Light, for example, that won't work anymore. Against mid-range decks, I think this Pantheon Yumi, especially with Judgment, for example, is really strong. Because you just still have the faded units, like you still have your 2-3 that just eats everybody. Like the one on White Flame just has faded, and then it grows, and it's a mid-range deck, like what do you do against that? Basically. And the more classic mid-range counters, which for example be deep as well, where you just have like your turn 7 power play, where you stall out the early game and then just drop down Nautilus and play 5 sea monsters, and your opponent's like, oh my god, how can I deal with that? I just lose to Triple Devour of the Depths, for example. And the another one I considered was just a Flock deck, or even Draven Silence. Silence, another mid-range Slayer card. You just stabilize against aggro game plan, and you just drop a Sire, and you're like, oh my god, I'm dead. Can't deal with this double attacking. It's a double attack, but it's just
Silence
can't just deal with it.
Really hard to deal with.
And the last deck I considered in this was just a Flock deck, basically, because even An-ETF is really, really good into mid-range decks because it just blow up everybody. And you saw before, I guess this is not An-ETF.
It doesn't look like it, no.
There it is. And basically, just Flock is an amazing card against mid-range decks. They just they have big units and they are damaged, and then you kill them for 1 mana, and then you just eventually play Tibalt. And if your opponent doesn't come prepared, like Yondy did, Aftershocks, they just lose to Tibalt, and then you just play TF, deal 2 to everybody, then you play another Tibalt, and then you play Riptide Rex, and just close out the game. So there's plenty of options for all of these 2 different paths. I'm currently tending towards just the first one because I have 100 games on Binding Light this season and total probably 500 games on Scouts. And if they both are viable, I kind of want to make them work. But these are kind of my overall thoughts. I'm not decided quite yet. I will have to run a bit more practice matches. And of course, I hope that if you want, we can also practice with each other later on.
For sure, I would love that.
Absolutely.
So maybe as a closing point then, what will you do in this last week to prepare for seasonals? How do you plan on actually playing seasonals? If you have any special ritual you're going to do, go outside between each game or something like that. Let's start with Astrofeesh. What are your plans?
I usually don't prepare too much for tournaments. I just wing it mostly, and I found that it does pretty well. Although, considering it's seasonals, I probably will try out my decks a few more times just online to make sure I actually have a good grasp on them, But I am on the wait list instead of actually in the tournament, so there's a chance I just might not actually get to play, but I'm hopeful about it.
There's a good note, maybe. I'm also qualified through Gauntlet, but I will also be in the top players with my LP currently being at 150 just by slamming Ari Bard.
Great.
And so you can definitely have my spot as well, because if you're in both, you qualify through Masters first into seasonals. So there's already one spot, and if you're lucky, you'll get my spot.
Yeah, in my experience, waitlist players do usually get their stuff, because it also considers all the rioters that are in Masters that won't be able to participate, and there's also the Smurfs, which might be qualified, people that play on other servers and they can't play on their other ones, but they have their account qualified. So all those people fall off on the day of open rounds, and a lot of waitlist people get their spot.
Yeah. There's a lot of Smurfs, and also just people who can't make it on the day. It's the middle of summer. Some people just want to go outside, touch grass, and don't want to sit one whole day in the internet and play a card
touch
game.
Grass when you could play Legends of Runeterra instead, though.
That's a good point.
Why touch grass when you can play Grey Apothecary?
That's the real meta. But yeah, I suppose it just depends on how far up in the waitlist I am, I guess.
Yes, and the ladder waitlist has priority over Gauntlet waitlist, but I assume you have a decent chance of making it in, especially in the summer Gauntlet. It's the winter, and you might not make it. By the way, if somebody is in the Gauntlet, just in the waitlist, what you do is you just show up in the tournament, and you just click on Enter, and then it will tell you after the sign up has ended that you made it or didn't make it.
Yep.
Basically that. So if you were confused about how this works, just click on sign up and then wait, and it will tell you if you made it in or didn't. Yondy, what is your preparation going to be? And do you have any ritual for seasonals?
Well, like Astrofeesh, I usually just wing it, but that's normally because I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to Runeterra. But now that it's summer, I actually made myself some time. So I'm just going through the regular motions of screaming, playing a little bit of ladder because, my LP had a lot of dust in it. So I'm just cleaning that LP and going up through the ranks with my 3 lineup decks so I get some practice in. Actually, right now in like a couple minutes when we're done with this, I'm actually screaming with Tricky Tracy. So I'm trying to keep myself busy and just basically practice the lineup a lot, get a lot of experience with it, and I'm gonna try to record all the games that I play with it so I can get back to watch them later and just make some notes on the mistakes I made, which I make a lot, by the way. And just basically, that's the thing. That's the big thing that I've been wanting to do for the whole year, which is just give myself some time to just play this amazing card game and just be able to play with really good players and get better. The result for me doesn't matter that much. It's more the experience that I get out of it, and being able to improve and just at the end of the day also just have fun. It's the most important thing that we do is just we're playing a game. We started playing because we had fun, and we have to always remember to have fun at the end of the day. So that's basically it. Practice, keep myself busy, review my mistakes, and have fun.
That's great. And I can just add on with the scrimming and recording the games. What we do in ABG, for example, is we have like 5 players to a tournament, and we all watch the same games. One records both Discord perspectives, like we both players do on Discord, and we have both hands basically. And later, after the game, we all go back to the game we watched and just think about lines for both players. And it's really, really helpful. Just have this 5 like Masters players improving and just arguing about different lines, and like also seeing the different hand states, what the opponent had, what you had. It's really revealing when you play like around that specific card that was very obvious that I didn't have it, for example. And recording decks, especially sending them to other players, is also really helpful, like recording games. And
that sounds amazing.
Even have a section in RIWAN, I think, or maybe we removed it. I don't know. Like Keko removes channels all the time and adds them. So we had one for like board reviews, and if you like want Yondy, you can definitely post your recorded matches in there and get some feedback from other players. Astrofeesh, of course, as well, if you plan to record anything or something.
Yeah, I think that channel is probably dead, though. I think Kurgan pressed the nuke button on it and it's gone. But it's definitely... There's just ways, there's channels. There's also the AVG Discord, I guess. You can go there and at least ask people. There's always people willing to play this game. We all love the game. And so... that's what you said about your ABG system. It sounds really interesting and really, really good to improve.
It takes a lot of time. Like our usual tournament on it's Thursday, it takes like 4 to 5 hours just to play like 5 games. But it's really interesting. You learn a lot. Yeah,
that sounds great.
Yeah, and as general outro, just check out RIWAN, check out our Discord server where we all hang out and write funny articles, and just funny but also like insightful articles, I should say, and exchange poetry. And you have heard Yondy and Astrofeesh, both passionate article writers for our webpage, which we also will link in the description. And shout out to all the other pages we showcased. This will be a very long description with like the deck lists and the pages and the Discord servers.
But it will be full of knowledge, so it'll be worth it.
And thank you too for joining. I'm very happy that I invited you to. It's some very spicy lineups, and I already see my Twitter post the most spicy season lineup, question mark, exclamation mark.
It probably is. It probably is.
You use some clickbait there.
Well, but well-deserved clickbait, though.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, thank you too for joining. Hope you had a great time. Yeah, definitely a great time.
Yeah, it's been great being here.
Thank you for watching. Have a good night or day, and good luck to you in season as if you participate. Good luck to you too, Yondy and Astrofeesh.
Good luck.
Good luck to you too.